Forestry has a saying that you don't plant a tree for yourself, it's for the next generation. And if you can't be comfortable with that, then you're in the wrong job.
I started as forestry assistant in 1990. I was fresh out of University of Washington Forestry College, and there was a job posting for this small family-owned company, and not many people were interested in it. They thought, where's Bingen, Washington, and this small company? What is SDS Lumber Company? People like to work for a company that they believe in, and people like Wally Stevenson and Bruce Stevenson and Frank Dobbenspeck, these legendary people that really cared about their employees and cared about the company and cared about their lands. I mean, when you care about what you're doing and you really believe in it, other people believe in you.
In the beginning, Wally and Bruce lived in a tent with their family and worked with the mill. All they did was provide for each other. And as the mill grew, the community grew.
So they were both in Naval ROTC at University of Washington. They both went into the Navy as officers. So Wally, he was involved in the invasion at Normandy at D-Day, and he ran a patrol boat that helped basically patrol and make the way for other ships to come in and do the invasion. And the USS Meredith hit a mine and in the dark, and Wally's boat was the one that rescued the survivors. He was given a Bronze Star for his service at Normandy.
Bruce didn't talk about the war very much because being a captain in a war, whatever decision you made, someone died.
Wally and Bruce, they had this mechanical background growing up in a mill. It's just that Wally's passion, he was more interested in the woods and the logging, and Bruce was always more interested in the mechanical manufacturing side of things.
Grandpa said, if you two are gonna start out this business on your own, you're gonna take Dobby. He just trusted Dobby a lot to steer them and to guide them. He was their role model.
So Wally was more of the salesman, and Bruce was the mechanic, and Frank Dobbenspeck, he'd do anything and everything. So it worked out real well.
After the war in 1948 to 1960, it was all just a big boom of construction and opening of the National Forest land. So there was a supply of raw material, there was a demand for lumber, and that was just kind of what got the company to go from a small single saw, operation with a crew of 12 to a much larger operation.
Bruce was a mechanical engineer, and if there was anything that was broken, he was in charge of getting it fixed. If it was something that he couldn't fix himself, he would drive into Portland, work with a machinist, spend the night, and drive back in time for the 7 o'clock shift in the morning to keep the mill going.
Then the era of the 60s and the era of the 70s where we were trying to use the resource more fully, so the company has been tremendously successful. But yet they still had humility, and it was always live humble and be generous and work hard. Those were sort of the virtues. Everyone looked up to Frank Dobbenspeck. When he passed, not only was he Wally and Bruce's hero, he was all the employees' hero. And when he passed, it left a big void. So following the growth era of the 60s and 70s, we went into a contraction period in the late 70s and 80s. Construction was down. No one was building. You couldn't afford to build. and you couldn't afford a mortgage.
We shut the mill down, I think, for 10 months. It was, it was serious. Sitting in those meetings when you talk about shutting your operation down and you're already losing money, but you're going to lose more if you shut down. And it was tough.
And then in 1993, with Bruce's passing, it was another impact to the company and a loss of leadership. But at that time, fortunately, Wally was still around as the last of the three founders, and his son Bruce was president of the company at the time. So it was a major impact, but there was leadership in place to carry it on. So then we went into the era of the 90s, and coming out of that, where we can start to anticipate some better opportunity, and that's where Bruce's vision was to build a new sawmill. Young Bruce was Wally's son. He was quite a character. He was brilliant, had an intuition about everything. Like, he could figure things out, get to the essence of something in just an instant.
You might make me cry if I have to talk about my dad. But yeah, he was a total daredevil when he was a kid. Flew airplanes, was really into cars, Motorhead, had a bobcat as a pet, went to Harvard. Extremely inquisitive, curious about everything, extremely generous. Yeah, he was special, very special.
This is an old growth tree. This is the kind of tree that mills in the older days were set up to turn into lumber. Mills were designed to handle these very large diameter old growth trees. As the amount of old growth declined and the availability, what was left of it on the National Forest, people wanted to have it preserved, so the industry had to evolve into using second growth trees. This is a second growth tree here that represents the size of tree that we now saw regularly to make into lumber. And Bruce led that effort, which was designing a whole new mill and building a whole new mill that focused on sawing second growth timber like this. What was at stake was either you retool and build new mills that are designed to more efficiently handle small diameter trees, or you shut down the mill and go out of business. And if we hadn't done all of that, if we hadn't reinvested and come out of the recession with forward-thinking attitude, then the impacts to the company and the community and the family would have been severe, been devastating. It was a Friday, and I was in class in December 1997, and I had a phone call that young Bruce had passed away of a heart attack at age 53. So I remember driving home, and the next morning I went to Bruce's house in Portland. Wally was there, the family was there, and Wally almost immediately came up to me and said, "We have a lot of work to do, and I want you to become president. I think we need you to do it, and I'll help you every way I can." And I was already in shock from Bruce's passing, and then for Wally to say that to me. I said, "I'm kind of inexperienced, don't you think?" And he said, "No, you're fine." He said, "And I'll help you in any way I can." And he told me, he said, "I was a Navy captain when I was 24 years old, and I had responsibility for people and their lives in the war. And your age doesn't really matter."
I mean, everyone sort of came around, everyone rallied, and really it was my grandfather, though, who was like the stable rock that was there. Wally was extremely stoic and strong, and he was like our captain, you know. It was very much balanced by my grandmother. I think she really cultivated in him this extreme generosity. But he could be firm, he could be intimidating, but he was always fair. He was sort of mythical. I mean, it's that generation that's so amazing.
Wally's passing was, that was a key moment in my life. You know, Wally was quite a mentor to me, my greatest mentor. And I know people in other businesses that have worked with Wally who have said that he was the greatest businessman they've ever known. You know, with he and Priscilla passing both within a day of each other, They lived an amazing life and they had an amazing end.
Dad picked the best guy for the job, family or not. And he just treated it like the best business choice. You know, it was a good choice.
Dad was really good at picking people, and Jason was an excellent choice. And it was a time when I don't know what we would have done without Jason.
I remember thoughts going through my head like, the family has just given me the keys to the family business, and I need to respond accordingly. The next generation of family ownership, you know, it's a big responsibility.
You know, a lot of the stuff that we've been doing recently is really just for the future. How do we make sure that we're providing as much of a service to the buyers as well as the people that we work with? And a lot of it is just saying, you know, it may not be for me, it may be for my children. You know, if we try to grow and make sure that it's there tomorrow, then we don't necessarily have to worry about the worries of today.
Hardship is not a bad thing. Out of hardship comes strength, wisdom, and growth.
Where we envision growing is in our timberland ownership. Our goal is to be self-sufficient, have enough timberland ownership that managed on our philosophy, we can supply the mill and the community with all that it needs and be able to do that in perpetuity. The company doesn't exist without people. The people are our strengths. What we don't want to see change in our company is a loss of that sense of responsibility to our people, our community, our environment, and our lands.
Dad and Wally and Frank, it's their work ethics, their integrity that is being passed on. It's our responsibility to do the same thing for the following generations.
They made sacrifices to build something for the future, for their children and their grandchildren, and we feel a responsibility to continue that.